good. I've got Ashley on the phone.
Is anybody else in there?
Yeah, there's 13 people.
Okay. Good afternoon. This is Bruce St. Denis, City Manager, and moving forward on this, you all have been put on and accepted positions on a advisory committee to the council, and so we will need to select a chair and a vice chair. Neither Kelly nor I are eligible for either position. And since there's three of you, we'll create a treasurer if you want. So you got yourself out of that one very well. Okay. Is there a motion for chair?
I would prefer, since I've never been on a city council or subcommittee or any sort of city function, and both of you have.
Okay, I nominate Carolyn to be the chair of the committee.
Okay, are there any other nominations? That was for Carolyn Probst. If there's no other nominations, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You have to vote.
Aye.
You can't get out of it by not voting. Okay, and a vice chair?
I want to nominate Barb.
Okay, nomination made by Carolyn Probst is for Barb Knott. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of Barb Knott for the vice chair?
Aye.
That means I do all the work, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. Yes, you got that down. Okay, now we want to talk about the grant discussion.
Can we mention first about the public comment that we did receive some public comments?
Okay.
That was the next on the agenda. We did receive some that, Colleen provided to us, and everyone, I think, has an opportunity to look at that comment.
Okay,
There was two. There was from, Gary and, Julia.
Juliana, yes, okay. All right, and those are in the record, and you have reviewed them. Okay, we can go forward. I know that there was some discussion at the thanks. At the meeting we had, I think it was last Friday, and there was some comments sent around, and there were responses. So do we want to we can start there, or if you'd like, we'd asked John Roll from the city of Seaside, who is working on their grant program, to provide us with some information regarding their application and also their criteria, that sort of thing. So they're probably a little bit ahead of us. We can talk about that. And Carolyn, if you want to talk about it first, or what order you want it in?
Just some questions on that. Have they already deployed the questionnaire out to their cities for their businesses to fill this out?
Yeah.
As far as I know, they have.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
One thing, I just got a text that people can't hear us on the microphone, so.
Yeah, you have to,
You might want to adjust. They can hear Bruce, but they can't hear us.
yeah. And also, if you can set it straight, just like this, because they're unidirectional, so they only pick up if you're firing right at them. And you could probably pull that closer to you. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I hope that's better.
So, Bruce has provided us the grant applications from Seaside, as well as the information from the assistant city manager. Does anyone have any comments or questions on that?
I just had a chance, I went through it kind of quick, but it seems like it's a very simple process. Or there's like four,
You mean in terms of the grading?
yes.
Yeah, I think that looks pretty straightforward. Where my concern is when I look at the application, is there's a lot of, well, first of all, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And, in my opinion, there'd be a lot of subjectivity in terms of people, the reviewers looking at it, because there's nothing that's really, you know, like a yes or no, or a data-driven, you know, concrete data-driven type of question. And I think we had kind of listed some, at least concrete ones that you could have, that it's a simple, interpretation of that.
Right.
I don't know, what does everyone else think about?
Yeah, that's what I got too, and the same thing with the criteria is also a pretty subjective-based, review, and the way that they're taking in those is, I guess it says 5 reviewers, and then they're taking an average, so something like that doesn't do in the review process is addressing there's drastic differences in answers. So if you have like a couple reviewers who are scoring at 4, and then a couple reviewers scoring at 1, that usually indicates problem, but in their process, that just puts it into an average and moves on to the next step. And typically when it happens in a grant review, you would want to address that difference and see why.
Yeah, we had discussed kind of ranking the questions before we get the input from the applications. So there's kind of a spreadsheet form that would rank those based on how we weight those questions, or the answers to the questions that we have, so that hopefully that process is mostly somewhat automated.
Yeah,
And then we can delve into the ones that are they don't fit in and are not questionable, but are concerning, that need to further look at that.
Yeah, the aim of that would be to just reduce personal bias that's coming from the reviewers.
No, because I just.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, do you have any, input based on, your interpretation of what you heard from council on the other night? Because, I mean, I heard, a couple of things that I heard was, they weren't really interested, or it wasn't, an issue to them if a business had looked for funds somewhere else, if they've applied for some of those federal, programs or other programs. You know, the consensus I thought I heard was like, well, you know, that's not really something that, you know, that we need to ask that question. And so there were some differences, I think, in terms of what they were expecting versus perhaps what Seaside rolled out or what we had been talking about before. I mean, my concern is that we kind of put something together which is not at all what the council is really looking for, and we're kind of spinning without, having some more clear direction in terms of what it is they are looking for from these, applicants.
Okay, I would respond in that the council, saw the first draft of what you all put together, and so I would take that as the base, and then they made some other comments on top of that, like, there were questions, and it was like the ones that you just, came through with, Carolyn. So I would say that, it's some kind of a mix, and that they are looking for us to, try to refine it based on that. They have not, I've just sent them the information from, Seaside, so they've not had a chance to look at that, but they will by the meeting tomorrow. I think that this is going to be give and take, and so, work from what we originally put out, their comments, and then also, take a look at this, which I think is a more subjective, but, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. It'll be interesting to see how we can quantify based on some of the things the conversations we've already had.
So how about then if we start with kind of what we ended up with at the last time we met, and then there was some, an email that I sent out afterwards, which was kind of my interpretation of, what the council was kind of looking for based on their discussion, and maybe if we go through that list to start with and add or subtract from that, and then maybe draw from this information we got from Seaside if we think there are some other things that are relevant there.
Do we have a copy of that email that you sent out? Because I want to have it with me.
Oh, actually, it was kind of, the one that, this one that you have here.
Oh, it's never on the paper.
I was poorly prepared for this. Can we get somebody to run a copy, please? Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
What is it you need?
This one here?
Is it the one that, Kelly sent around a final? Copy.
It's after that one.
It's after that one, okay, all right.
It started with the version that Kelly sent out after our meeting, and then some suggested changes based on, the council meeting on whatever night that was.
Sent on April 20th at 1:27.
Mm-hmm.
We'll wait till Rusty comes back.
Can I, is it too soon to ask the question of, before we dive into this, how the process is gonna work with the council, having a meeting tomorrow, what's the next steps? Because if we need to kind of put the whole program together today, then I'm willing to dive in and do that. If we're gonna have some back and forth with them, it kind of will make a difference on how we proceed.
So like what the goals of today's meeting
Yeah.
are before tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you said earlier, it's gonna be a back and forth. We look at the next step. I mean, you've done some good work initially. Kind of go through that, see if you have consensus on those things, look at some of the other things that have come into it. And then we'll meet, and then I anticipated probably 2 more meetings with you folks, and then followed right after with the council, probably 2 next week. And so, that would be the process, because, they definitely want to be, set all the criteria, those kinds of things, but they're asking us to come up with recommendations. So I don't think we have to come up with the whole thing today, nor do I think it's possible, because they will have comments.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we just wanna
Yeah.
kind of figure out, like you said, the goal for today.
So then does it make more sense to have, to maybe not eliminate some of the, questions that we previously had on our application, but to kind of have that whole set there and then have council look at that and kind of make their decisions in terms of which ones are, important from their perspective, and then start having some of them out at the next meeting.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. You can present everything and then a rationale with why you want it. They have that, and then they can decide what.
And Carolyn, I'm not able to find what you sent quickly. If you could send, no, but if you could send it to me, I can put it up so everybody can see it that's watching the meeting.
I'll give you that copy.
Yeah, I've got this, no, but can you forward me your email?
Yes.
Then I'll put it up.
So are you wanting to share that then?
Is this going out, or is this just here?
No, it's not going out, it's just on that.
All right, never mind.
We can do that, but
I think that would be good if we can, Rusty. If
if you can send the electronic file, I can share out the desktop on mine, and it would actually show to everybody that's watching remotely.
And if you would, copy Rusty also.
So can you explain kind of the change to me? Yes, people on the,
Well, this is they want to share this, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, I created this list. I kind of took all, I got all of your guys' comments, and, I kind of noted where those changes were alongside your email.
okay. Well, why don't we just start at the top of the application requirements, and let's just go through them, and, decide if these are things that we want to include on the list that we're gonna send to council, and then maybe some, at the end, we'll have some recommendations in terms of, which ones that we think that would be most effective and why. That make sense? Okay, so the first ones are, pretty straightforward, the business organization name and physical address, ownership information, which we're looking for, name, mailing address, phone, email, that sort of thing. The ownership start date, and again, our intent on the ownership start date is we'd be able to determine the length of, how long the business has been in business. And the industry type, and this one was reduced from the list that we had before, because, the discussion that focused in the council meetings, these monies are coming from the tax fund, which means it's gotta be a tourism-related business, per the ORS definition. So, the industry type, I just selected the ones that kind of fit that definition, but left a category in there for other, if somebody wants to make the case. So we have here restaurant, bar, or other food service, retail, accommodation, and then an other. And then if somebody wants to make the case under the other as being a tourism-related business, there have the opportunity to do that.
I think that might bring us to our first question of adding, first question to add, is to have them explain why they are tourism-based business, so that we can address that for council.
Okay, and in this section, or is that for an addition?
Well, I'm not sure, I just wanted
Okay.
where it goes in the list, but I want to make sure we put it out here, because if that's what the council wants to hear, then we should make that one of the questions.
It really makes sense in that spot.
Yeah. And, well, if we go down a couple more, there's added another one, approximately what % of your businesses derive from tourism? So, because again, one of the comments that Ashley was making is that it has to have a substantial purpose of tourism in terms of the business. So perhaps that would be something that we want to expand on that, to say that would be a yes, no, but then give them an opportunity to explain the, how they, tourism-related business.
Right after that question.
Yeah, kind of group those together. And then we have the Canada Beach Business License Account Number, the State of Oregon Registry Number. One thing I noticed in the CSI package is that if it's required, I don't know if every business is required to have an Oregon Registry Number. I don't know the answer to that. But if you do, I think, there, okay, I wasn't sure on that one. So then the question approximately is what % of your business is derived from tourism? Like I said, the applicant will have to make that assessment for each business. And then the next one was, I think was a new one that was added since we met last, was what is the business status? Are you fully operational, partially operational, you know, and I define that as delivery, takeout, online, curbside, or are you fully closed? We might want to add a essay portion of that one as well. Thoughts on that?
I think it would be good to let business explain, because, you know, maybe somebody's doing something that's not one of those categories, that allows them to.
So maybe an other on that one as well?
And an explanation, yeah.
You could make it like a checkbox and then an explain box.
Right, and I think that would be, and I think we talked about this at the last meeting, that would be a great way, if we could, as much as we could have check boxes, in order to do, you know, first round of grading based on the check boxes, but then an appropriate, give them an opportunity to provide more detail.
I agree with that.
The next one, estimated number of months for businesses sustained under current revenue conditions. And that would be, again, the number. Commercial lease, mortgage payment, the next one. One after that, average FTE employment in 2019, rounded to near full number. That was one that was on the seaside, application. I guess the question would be, is that something that we want to make the question on the application?
I think it's a vital question to know where they're at previously in place, where they're at now. Of course, everybody's going to be suffering in that area. It would be good to have an understanding.
I was unmuted before.
I know we talked about setting that in place, how to calculate that.
Yeah.
I think we need to give them that so that
Yeah.
it's clear. But I don't know if we need a checkbox to make that simpler for
She's
the,
now.
sort out.
No, we just have,
Have to put in the
have to
number.
put in the number of the paragraph.
Yeah, maybe do it right.
From these ranges, I don't know what should be more.
Hi, guys. This is Ashley. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I spent the last couple minutes trying to get unmuted. Thank you, Lori. So just a couple things. First of all, I think for the Zoom call people, it is a little difficult to hear. So if you could, whoever's speaking could move closer and maybe speak a little clearer, that would, I think, helpful for everybody on the line. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but I do think it's important. And I think it was Carolyn who mentioned it, or maybe it was Barb. And I think Jim touched on it too. I think we need to be really clear on the application that you have to be a tourist related facility and that you're going to have to be able to make a showing that you substantially serve tourists. And my suggestion is that, we make that a threshold question. That very clear that it's not every type of business, it's just ones that can meet this definition, and that you're going to need to provide some proof of that. And then you move on to the other, which I would consider the secondary criteria. Okay, once you've proven you're a tourist-related facility, then we're going to ask you all these other questions.
So, Ashley, can I ask you a question of what proof are we gonna ask them to provide?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. What I was thinking, my idea was that, can they provide, credit card statements for, a certain period of time that shows that, 70% of the people that use credit cards at their business have a billing zip code that's outside of Clatsop County. That would be one way. That is the legal standard. So we're gonna have to come up with some way that they can make a showing to us that they meet that criteria.
Yeah, I'd be a little concerned that might be proprietary information that typically businesses don't share, even in the grant process, of their personal business income and credit card information. I don't know if that's kind of standard practice across everywhere, but when we tried to assess that in the past with some of our projects, that it's not proven to be useful most people don't like to give out their business information.
Right.
In that level of detail, I guess, was a simple way.
Yeah, I mean, so what we could do then, and I would assume this would not be proprietary, but, number of transactions, not necessarily the amount of those transactions, but of, 100 transactions that occurred in January 2020, 80% of the billing addresses on those credit cards were outside Clatsop County. That would give us, that's a decent showing to say that this is a business that serves people who travel to Cannon Beach.
Well, if we narrow that down to January, then I think that number would be very low for most businesses, because that's one of our worst months of business throughout the year. As opposed to August, which would be our busiest month of the year, so those numbers would be vastly different, depending on the time frame.
I just threw out January as an example of a month that occurred before the crisis. But I think any period of time that we choose, as long as it's reasonable, would be fine. And this isn't the only way that we could verify, but it is it's just my idea of a relatively straightforward way to do so.
I think if we're gonna make it a threshold question, and I recognize that, Ashley, your job is to protect us as best you can. I guess I'm comfortable with the judgment of the folks that we have here, that it is a tourist business, because I think most of them that be applying are. And if they're not, maybe we can say that we might ask for a verification on something. But we're trying to keep this to where somebody can fill this out in, an hour and a half, and not have to do that kind of research.
But Bruce, what I get what you're saying, and I would push back, as the legal counsel for the city, is at what expense? We want to do this program, but this is not similar to the city of Seaside, where they're unrestricted funds. These are restricted funds. And, I think we need to require some sort of showing. I would like numbers, but there are other ways to do it. Can maybe have a narrative about your business plan. If you're a tourist shop that sells Cannon Beach t-shirts, you can, maybe a narrative about how your target clientele is, visitors from out of state that want to wear Cannon Beach t-shirts back in the city of Seattle. But I would strongly recommend that the threshold is that they have to make some sort of showing. We do the same thing when we do the TAF grants, that, you know, we ask how your event puts heads in beds. How does your event, you know, increase or aid tourism?
Again, I can accept the, idea of a narrative, and I think that folks here that are on this team would be able to do that analysis. And I think it would take less time for somebody. And again, I think most of the business that we're talking about are going to be clearly tourists. So if you are okay with a narrative, that works for me.
So could sorry, Betsy, the first question that we have after the basics of the business is asking them approximately what percentage of your business is derived from tourism. If we have them do a percentage and then provide them with the opportunity to either provide the credit card information you talked about or the narrative about their business, and kind of give them the opportunity to support the number that they provided, would that be a valid approach to this?
Sure. I mean, it's all about the city's risk. It's not the recipient of the funds who's liable for misuse of these funds. It's the city. So if the city feels comfortable doing that, then that is one way to do it. But again, it's a risk analysis. And so, you know, of course, as your attorney, I would like for you to have more information than that to be able to make the decision. But if you're willing to take the risk, eyes wide open, then, you know, that is a call for this committee and for the city council.
So why don't we, for council, we'll kind of leave that question here, and then about what percentage of your business is derived from tourism, and then give the examples that Ashley provided in terms of the essay portion, that they can respond and see where the council's comfort level is with that.
That works for me.
Or we could maybe put as part of that essay portion, how can you, not necessarily how can you prove that, but what information you have to support that.
Yeah, right.
Right. And if you're going to do something like that, you know, on the application form, you know, I would want some sort of signature block, you know, having the person verify, sign that they are, you know, everything that they're filling out is accurate, and that, you know, if it is not accurate, then the city would have the ability to, you know, get the funds back. So, you know, if we give something to somebody and then we find out that they, you know, misled us on this application, then we'd be able to recover those funds from them. So, you know, that would make me more comfortable.
And one other thing that came to mind when we were discussing this is that one of the requirements in the ORS is that it has to be, the applicant, it has to be a facility that has a 10-year lifetime, et cetera. And one of the comments of the public input that we got, I think the question came from somebody who perhaps would not satisfy that requirement because somebody who's working on their home or something, that there will be a criteria for being eligible for this, that it is, you know, a brick and mortar, some facility with at least a 10-year lifetime. So I think that needs to be made clear in terms of the application. I mean, assuming that the money, the entire pot of money that we have for this is all coming from tourism dollars.
Okay, Ashley, I think that one of the things that we're saying, though, is that we're going to, we're making a decision or a judgment call on how those funds will be used. And I think on the original purpose, there was a 10-year life, that kind of thing. But if we're looking at businesses, if we're going to limit ourselves to facilities in 10 years and that kind of thing, I think we're going to eliminate most of our businesses.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that as well.
So here's the thing, the law's pretty clear on that it has to be a tourist related facility, and it has to be improved real property that has a useful life of 10 years or more. That doesn't mean that the business has to be in business for 10 years or, you know, has shown that it's going to last an additional 10 years. You know, again, we're interpreting this law to include, businesses that are not traditionally included by it. So I think this is an area that is there's a showing easily made, that we have a storefront, that, it is real property, it is a building designed to last more than 10 years and not, a food truck. And so we meet the first element of this statute.
All right, so Ashley, let me ask you this question, because many of our businesses rent their space, and so they don't actually own that space. Will that be a qualifying factor? And in that case, landlords and property owners would be the only ones to qualify if that's one of the criteria we factor in, which would eliminate many.
I think, again, it's a risk. Most of tourist-related facilities that get these dollars are, owned by a local government or nonprofit, but there's nothing in the law that says that that's a requirement. So, a traditional use of this money, would be, a museum that attracts tourists. There's nothing to say that the museum couldn't rent the space from, another party. We would still be funding a museum. Does that make sense? So not even all of the traditional recipients of funds under this statute are owners as opposed to renters.
So a case could be made for a business owner who is renting space, physical space, from a landlord to fit this definition, but somebody who runs a business, say, out of their home or doesn't really have a brick and mortar location, that would be a harder case to make.
Yeah. I would say that it would strain the definition to include somebody's home, that somebody's home is a tourist-related facility. But I think there's a case to be made for a rented storefront.
So then let me pose another question. We have many musicians and artists in our community that are here for our visitors in all the different restaurants. They put art up that don't have a facility that provide that music throughout town for various venues. Then they wouldn't, in my understanding, qualify under that because they're a service provided to businesses that then provide for visitors. So that would possibly eliminate them in this grant process.
I would say so.
Yeah, and I mean, the one of these that we got in our public comment, it would eliminate her as well. And I think maybe the message for council on that one is if they're interested in assisting that segment of the tourism part of this community, that they would need to lose some funds from somewhere other than tourism dollars, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's something that we have to, provide as a recommendation and maybe give them some examples of folks like the ones that Jim just made, that those members of our community would not be helped with this particular program.
Correct.
I guess I would just voice that I'm concerned trying to make everyone fit into these qualifications may eliminate the vast majority of who we're trying to help.
Well, I mean, it
So
wouldn't
it concerns me.
Yeah, well, I agree, it's concerning. It wouldn't eliminate any of the lodging facilities, any of the retail shops, and the restaurants, and those are kind of obvious. And those are the ones that ended up on the list here and then the other. And so what we're really talking about is that other category.
Yeah. But if I look at some of how the PPP loans and EIDL loans and stuff, it's been the larger companies for the most part.
Yeah.
And the larger banks that have been able to support those. And it's the small business, the sole proprietor, the artists and stuff that have missed out on that. And when I came into this, my main concern was making sure that we could support the people that need it most. And, I'm concerned that we're not going to be fulfilling that need. And I feel very gut-wrenching to think that we won't be able to help the people that need it most.
Is there a connection that if somebody, as part of their business, they provide or do business within a restaurant, something like that, would that be enough of a tie, Ashley? Because they're definitely tourism related.
I mean, the answer to that question is I don't know. You know, again, we're very, very far into uncharted territory. You know, and, you know, the only guidance we have is the statute and the Attorney General's opinion. And the Attorney General's opinion is clear that once you qualify as a tourist-related facility, the local government can use these funds to, quote, fund that facility in any way, which has been, you know, which was traditionally interpreted to mean either maintain or construct or remodel the facility. But, you know, again, could a case be made that when you're funding the facility, you're funding subcontractors who work within the facility? Again, that is, you know, that is a risk, and it's the City of Cannon Beach's decision about whether or not that's a risk you want to take. And Jim, I get your comments that, you know, there are people are going to be left out. And frankly, that was one of my, you know, one of the things that I mentioned from the beginning is that if we're, you know, the question that came to me is, can we use these funds for this grant program? And the answer was, you know, maybe. And it has to be clear that these are restricted funds. This is not the City of Seaside where they're using general fund dollars. You know, these are legally restricted funds, and we can make a case for some businesses, but not others. But there's nothing to stop the City of Cannon Beach from, you know, doing what Seaside did, which is creating a program using unrestricted funds. And then, you know, I don't even have to be here for this conversation because there's no legal limits on that. Or you could do some sort of, you know, combination. If you wanted to have a grant program, you know, still ask these questions and get this information. And then when you're going to make the final decisions, you know, you can give grants to everybody, but, you know, you can fund some of those grants out of the TLT reserve and some of it another way.
But if we use that approach, we would have to have city council approval before.
All of it.
Right.
We'll have to get,
Well, I know, but that particular issue would have to be decided.
yeah. And that's what I'm trying to know. Restrictions, et cetera, may be left out unless there's a policy decision that entitles those that work within a tourism facility qualify.
So Ashley, I know that the ORS has the facility side to it, but it also has the marketing aspect. Is there a
Right.
way to kind of go down that route with some of our businesses?
Yeah, so that's,
Or the marketing ability, from your opinion?
yeah, so I wanted to look at that. I was thinking about that as we were talking. So I'm going to get the actual, you would think that I'd have the statute saved on my computer. I'm going to get the,
I know in all our marketing efforts, it's to draw people from more than 50 miles away. It's kind of the rule of thumb that I used, to kind of summarize that law.
here's what it actually says. Tourism promotion. Actually, I don't think that this is active. Hold on a second. So we're talking about what is the definition of tourism promotion. Almost there. Okay, so tourism promotion means any of the following activities: advertising, publicizing, or distributing information for the purposes of attracting and welcoming tourists, conducting strategic planning and research necessary to stimulate future tourism development, operating tourism promotion agencies, and marketing special events and festivals designed to attract tourists.
So, for what, the applicants are probably looking for funding right now, it doesn't really fit into that criteria, because they're looking
Right.
to make their way through this. So, in terms of the question of, is there other general funds available that might help some of these other businesses, I think that's a big question for council.
Yeah, there's none.
Um,
In my opinion, there's none.
But I think what we would need to convey is that as it's laid out now, it will limit the amount of applicants who are eligible for this. But if we did leave the other on here, and if somebody wanted to make the case, and if council chooses to change their decision and maybe release some of the general funds, I know Bruce, you say that's not an option, but I think that's something that we have to tell council that's how you can help this other segment that will not be served by this. And then if we continue to go through what we have on the application, I think that would, the questions would work for both groups, if you will.
Or they think the risk is acceptable or not.
Right, and I think, again, that's their decision. I mean, what we can do really is lay in front of them, here are the issues with the way that it's laid out right now. Here are the questions that we think that you can use to make the assessment, and then just move on from there.
And I'm certain I'm gonna get a lot of questions about clarification on this from various businesses throughout town, and so I'm hoping that I can have that information, so we can share that and make it clear for everybody that this is what it is, so that,
So if I
And we can
could,
make that,
so, one of the things that we have talked about a lot is, funding special events using TAF funds, and the city has done so, and there's some good support, especially recently, for, being able to use transient lodging dollars, for special events in themselves. So one of the ways that we could do this is be really clear on the application that you have to make the case that you meet one of these two definitions, and we can put the words from the law directly into the application, and then ask them to provide a narrative regarding how they meet one of these definitions, and provides whatever supporting documentation they believe is necessary, and then the council or whoever makes the final decision can evaluate it. Are you a musician that regularly, quote, puts on a special event, and you can prove that people travel from 50 miles away or further specifically for your concert that you put on, outside on the beach? Then we could let council make those decisions about whether or not that they believe that there's enough evidence that that person is, quote, tourism promotion, that musician in him and herself brings enough people to town specifically to see them to be able to meet this definition. It does kind of kick the can over to the council and essentially say, this one's your call. Whereas I think we talked a little bit more about having more objective criteria. But I wanted to throw that out as a potential solution.
but I think it's important that if we lay that criteria out, then that gives every business the opportunity to look at it and see how they fit into it, and whether they can or not, they can make that decision, and we may get questionable ones in the end that we have to decide, but I can think of many that would be very easy to fit in that, so.
So just one piece of pushback on that as well is that, you may have a lot of unhappy people that they thought they met this definition, and they thought they put out the showing necessary, and the city council decides differently, and then, I guess it's a lot easier with objective criteria. Are you a facility, in town, you have a storefront, you can show that you serve or provide something necessary for tourists, that is a lot more objective, and you have a lot more, you really lessen people saying, why did I, spend all this time filling out this material when you're never going to give me the money anyhow? Or how come you gave this person the money but not me? It can create a lot of animosity within your business community when really you're intending to distribute funds.
And I think conveying that concern or that potential issue to council, and with the flip side of that being, is there an opportunity to have some funds that aren't tied to, the transient lodging tax thing, in order to balance that? And I think those are kind of the two things that kind of council needs to make a decision on that. Because, if we keep trying to fit in people or businesses that are going to be a hard fit into that definition, and I think we know that it's a stretch on quite a few of those to fit in that definition, that from a legal perspective, obviously, the city is going to be putting itself at risk in that, and what option do they want to take?
Right.
I think what I would suggest is that we lay this out for council tomorrow and let them make a decision, because I think that virtually everything that we're talking about doing is a stretch. So, we're talking about some way to justify, to me, and I'm only one person, certainly not talking, for this committee or for the council, but that from the outset, for this to work, we had to rethink how we were going to use those funds and understand that we were taking a risk in doing so, and not necessarily to try to say, well, this is, you have to meet this criteria, because virtually none of the people were trying to help meet the criteria. But on one hand, we're saying, but maybe if you kind of work out of one of those, we'll say it does. Well, that's a justification that probably would pass muster either. So for this to work, I think that they do have to make a decision as to what risk they're willing to take.
Right, and I think there's different levels of risk in terms of the different types of businesses. I think obviously a lodging facility, could pretty easily say, and probably most of the restaurants could probably do that. The galleries could probably do that. I think that, there's a broad range there of how easily you could fit into the stretch criteria, and down at the other end, it's a real stretch.
I think, but even those, I don't know how a gallery or a restaurant fits into the criteria of a tourism-related facility. Tourists come here and they probably rent the space, but I don't know if it's the same thing as building a conference center or something like that. So I'm just saying that, I never saw this thing working unless we actually were willing to take the risk. And I think that, we're talking about threshold questions. I think that's a threshold question for the council.
I agree.
And then I think that we can, talk more about it as far as, what is eligible and what's not.
Okay.
So
It's certainly.
one last point for me, and this is really the only topic I'm going to have a lot to say about, so you'll hear a lot less from me when you guys move on. But I guess my one piece of pushback will be like, yes, let's take the risk, but if we're going to take the risk on, these individuals and these businesses are going to be receiving funding, I would like them to help the city out too, by them making the case to the city, by the city requiring some sort of documentation. I have more concern about saying, yes, city's ready and willing to take this risk, but we're also not going to require the people who are taking the risk to help us out with, giving us receipts or, some sort of objective data to show how they meet this criteria.
Good point, Ashley. Should we move on?
Yeah.
Actually, the criteria, because we obviously can't do anything more on this topic, and council will need to weigh in.
The only final thing I would add to that is, if we're going to design that question based on the law, will Ashley's help be available to provide that clarification for our question?
Yeah, as long as you are working
Yeah.
with this group, and, even if we get into the recommendations on the grants, that will be decided by council,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, I would just recommend that approach, you would do something, like Ashley described, where they have to make the case that they meet one of these two definitions, provide necessary documentation, and then the way council reviews that is they make it binary, all of them vote 1-0. It fits the definition, it does not. Any, businesses that have conflict and not unanimously decided have to be discussed. And then you wanna look on, also if you're trending these on, in comparison to the industry type, they fell under, and kind of do an analysis if they're being equivalent to equivalent applicants.
So let's see, so where are we at now, the business status one, or did we talked about that one?
We ended on the, full-time.
The full-time, okay, and we said that was one that we probably wanted to keep, and we could either do it as a drop-down with ranges, or we could actually just have them put in their number, rounded to the nearest person. I think that's where we kind of stopped.
Right.
What are your guys' thoughts on that one in terms of the input?
I think we need to get to site, the link to help them figure out what an FTE is, and then have them just put a number.
Okay, just a number, okay, without a range, okay. And, the Seaside application had a link to,
Right.
it was just a basic one to say how you computed, the full-time equivalent, and they used the number of 30 hours per week as, okay. Came from the world with that, it was bigger, but, I guess that's what's here. And then, I think, Jim, you had a question on the next one, on one of our go-rounds. The total number of employees prior to the City of Cannon Beach emergency declaration. The intent of this one really was, how many people did you have, what's your normal for right now? And that included full-time and part-time, so did you have 4 people on your payroll? And then maybe another, a partner question that says, well, how many do you have on your payroll now? So we could see how many people were affected.
But, and it felt like we were asking them the same question before, because we're asking them what their number was
I know, but
last year.
my sense is that for this community, in the summer, employers have a lot more employees than they have in the winter. So the previous one really is, how many people do you have for the entire year, where this one was really, okay, it's March, how many people did you have on your payroll?
Okay.
If that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense to you, we can change that.
No, and it's March, a week before spring break.
Right.
Some businesses had already done their hiring for that.
And really, I think the previous one, the FTE employment, kind of get a sense of, how big on an average for the year their business is. And this next one was really, what's the direct impact? And I think we needed to add another one. We added a question here, did you have to lay off, furlough, or reduce hours or pay for your employees? And then maybe the question after that is, well, how many people do you have on the payroll now?
Right.
And again, the intent here was try to get that data-driven information, first, and then, figure out what sort of essay type of things that are relevant.
When I reread those, I was just like, these are the same questions,
Yeah.
what I felt, and so we just need, maybe we need to be a
Explain it more.
little more clear, maybe 3rd January through March, as just the 3rd quarter. As a definition for that.
And then the next two ones were, I think the order of the, states should be reversed. The revenue in the period from March 11th to April 17th was what percentage of your revenue in the period of the previous year? So I think those two sets of years have to be reversed, right? Because we want to see what was your revenue and what was your payroll cost in this last 5 weeks compared to the same 5 weeks last year.
Yeah, and one of the, when I look back at this question, one of the things that has come up is some of the hotels have shown similar numbers, I think, for that quarter. but if you, and when I reached out and talked to a few that I was aware of, they were remodeling, so the previous year, those numbers were significantly lower, because they had half of their hotel closed for remodel. And so those numbers may look the same now, even though they're not the same qualification. So I'm not sure we might need to add a exclamation box
Yeah,
there,
where there
so
is the
that people can,
extenuating circumstances.
right, so that can be included as well.
That's a good point. And then the ones that were kind of all crossed out here was kind of the essay questions, and a couple of them were crossed out because council really said, you know, they weren't really interested in, or that wasn't relevant. Like the very first one, other grant loans or assistance applied for along with current status. They basically, that's what I heard, that they were like,
I heard the same thing.
yeah. So instead I kind of add, please provide any additional relevant information, which is pretty broad, where, the applicant could really fill in whatever they thought was relevant to their case.
Well, and when we had our first discussion about those and created these questions, you know, I pointed out that many people applied for the loans and may or may not be getting them, and I felt like people that didn't get in to those loans are probably in greater need. And so that was my feeling and why I felt those questions, or that question specifically, was important. Because if they didn't get any support anywhere else, then they probably have greater need. Not that everybody doesn't have great need, but, that was my thought behind that question.
Yeah, and I support that was our main way of measuring how much assistance someone has, or are trying to measure neediness.
Yeah.
So on the list that we provide back to council in terms of, you know, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of being more all-encompassing at the beginning and let them kind of whittle it down, we should perhaps re-include all of these and they can make the decision specifically that that is something that's important to them or that it's not something that is important to them, to have the information on that.
Yeah, we could just say why we recommend, and then they can decide.
Right. So are there any other ones that came to mind to anyone after the council meeting in terms of things that might be relevant to add? I was kind of surprised that council actually said that, you know, because we had talked about, did we want them to provide proof afterwards in terms of what they spent the funding on? What did you hear council say on that?
I don't think there was a big concern.
Okay.
Whereas in most grant programs, that's a huge part.
But I think that's a question, because I think I heard that they would be interested, or to know that they spent it on what they said they were going to spend it on. So I think that's a question that we need to ask council as well, is what reporting do you want back from the recipients in terms of how they spent their funds?
But if we're gonna include that, then we need to actually add that question.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, specific plans for use of grant funding requested, so that's one of the ones that we'll re-include on the list. And then, and I guess that's another section, what is the reporting requirements from the recipients, after they receive the grant?
So are those the only 2 points of the cross-out ones that we were looking at including back, or did we?
No.
We want to include all of them and still let them point by point?
Yeah, I think we should, let's re-include them all, let them point by point decide which ones that they feel are relevant. And again, these are all kind of the subjective ones, and part of that decision on their part might be, how are we going to, evaluate the applications when they come in, how much weighting is gonna be on the effectiveness.
Right, and I think they probably weren't privy to our, when we went through this, we had the very pinpoint questions that will help determine where everybody stands. And then we added kind of the subjective ones after to help us decide on anybody that doesn't fit in or out. And we're gonna need further information. These questions were there to help provide that information, for, you know, you got two businesses that may or may not, are kind of equal, and you only have funds for one as an example, those questions will help determine that. For whoever makes the decision, whether it's us or the council or.
I know a couple of the other things that came to my mind with council discussing is there a maximum and a minimum amount for the grant? And I just put for the maximum down here and kind of threw out the number that Sam mentioned, you know, you kind of, well, if it's 300,000 and there's 100 applicants, that's 3,000. So those numbers are not set, and the formula I have there for minimum won't work either. So, you know, those were two of the things that they asked questions about. What's the minimum, what's the maximum? If all of the funds aren't expended, what would happen to the remainder of the funds? I think the comment was that we go back to that.
I don't think that's gonna be an issue.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's gonna be an issue either.
Every funding source I've heard of has been exhausted almost immediately, so,
Yeah.
Right.
I would be surprised if that.
But I think it would be good if we provided those feedback points to the questions that did come up at their last meeting, because it was, as you all know, it was a pretty long discussion, and there was a lot of different ideas and stuff like that.
Would it make sense to, set a max that would be the max, maybe 5,000 or something, but it doesn't mean that that's what we're shooting at, but that would give us the opportunity to say, this situation is that much different?
So one of the things, in relation to that, one of the things I noticed on the Seaside application is, I think it was somewhere I read it, it said, how much of a, what is your request? And that's something that we don't have on ours. You know, we're not asking the applicants how much money are you requesting. Is that something that should be on our application?
I think that, to me, that's critical, you know, that's because, some small business, you know, maybe it's just the rent, and if it's a bigger business, uses a lot of water and electricity, you know, to go ahead and help them with the utilities is two very different numbers.
Assuming that should go like up or top somewhere.
And like, I would use the example of, businesses that are, staying open to be able to go ahead and have takeout food. Their costs, their ongoing costs in providing the service, you know, they've been absorbing more costs and probably not making that back. So I think that those kind of things, you know, do make a difference for it.
So we can list a maximum amount and then have them say the request amount and then put that in with the, plan for grant funding request.
Or in terms of what they want to use it
What
for.
they're planning, you know?
But we would perhaps put how much you're requesting somewhere kind of up at the top in terms of the factual, with the data-driven information.
Yeah, it's easy to zero.
Is there any, I guess, other questions?
Or application item.
I don't have it in front of me, but, Kelly did a good drawing the other day as far as what the things are. So maybe if we've taken care of the first one, can we have the conversation go on to the next?
The really big next item to talk about is recommendation for grant review process. That's a huge thing on its own. And if we have the list of recommended items to include on the application, I think that's the next logical step.
So we kind of do we have the stuff up for the application, do you think?
I think so.
I think so. I think, you know, just clean this up a bit, with what we discussed today.
Yeah, I can type up a new one, taking your notes, and then as we just go here, send it out, and everyone gets back to me, you know, before tomorrow morning, before the meeting, so we can have something to hand to them.
Can I ask a
But
process question? So is this committee thinking that we're just going to develop the criteria and the application form, and then people are going to apply and they're going to go directly to city council? Or are you guys going to do like a threshold recommendation? So the applicants would come to this committee, the committee will review, we can take a look at whether or not they meet the criteria, and then make a recommendation to the council to make the council, and have the council make the final decision? Or are we thinking everything's just gonna go straight to council?
I would be surprised if it goes straight to council, but that's possible, and they can tell us tomorrow. I think if we can kind of look at the next step and say, these are the criteria, these are the weights or something, to provide some kind of a better idea on how we're seeing this thing go.
Or maybe even before that, what Heather was getting at with this one process, you know, we would get the applications back, we would do some sort of, initial ranking based on the data-driven, questions. And maybe after that point, maybe there'd be a check-in with council there in terms of that step, and then, I don't know, I think that's what we have to kind of work out. Not necessarily how you weight each of the questions that we talked about, but what is the bigger process in terms of, we have all this information now, how do we go from there to getting a check rated? Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify.
My hope would be that it was just handled like we do other grant, programs within our city. We have a committee, the committee reviews the applications, they make their decisions, and then those decisions are forwarded on to the city council. I also have a huge concern that we don't want to make this, a lengthy process. The people need their money.
Right. And I think what I'd like to see us do is go on to the discussion about the criteria and the weighting the criteria, because that's where I think it's going to get really hard, because I don't know, I think it's going to tend to be more on the subjective than the objective. But I don't know that for sure until we get into the, you know, how we're going to rank. Again, I use the example again that if somebody that had to lay people off, is that, how much do we weight that? And then how much do we weight the one that stayed open, continued to provide services to residents and kept jobs? Do they get the same? You know, how do you, when we get into this and we start talking about, you know, that being objective, that's where I think it's going to get much harder and where most of the discussion is going to happen. So I'd like to put our toe in the water on that one, you know, while we're here today.
Well, I guess the first question on that one is, the questions that we have here, I think it would be it will allow us to at least make that type of, we have the data in order to consider those points that you just brought up. In terms of somebody who, you know, had to lay people off, somebody who stayed in business, but really is monetarily is in the red for that because they still have staff, but they don't really have a whole lot of revenue coming in.
Well,
A simpler approach to it, you can always do is you can sort of categorize in a few simple categories, like this is everything related to payroll, everything related to operations or whatever. And you do just a ranking approach from reviewers. Reviewers give their ranking approach through the set number, say 1 through 9, and then when there's discrepancies among those reviewers, so there's say 5 people who are ranked, who are on the review group, that's where you have to have discussion and come to a conclusion on why you're ranking it that way and where to do.
Is this way, like community grants, that's this kind of approach in terms of, or is it really all more subjective on that?
Well, I mean, we look at, obviously, look at the financial information very strongly, but we don't rank it as a committee. But we also have personal interviews with IDEA. You gain a lot from those.
Yeah, that's just my experience of when you're doing reviews on just paper applications. You're not getting any further information.
Right.
It's ultimately just named to kind of reduce bias and identify why people aren't in agreement on the team. So hopefully that after the review process, all the reviewers are pretty much in agreement.
Bruce, do you have a recommendation in terms of the weighting? I mean, I have a hard time right now really getting my head around how to weight these different questions.
right, and that's why I want to take it on, because I'm having a terrible time with it. Restaurant, bar, food service, retail, accommodation. Does that matter, or is that just a threshold question?
It's been an interesting point, because I know the discussion that council had was, I heard some of them talking about there should be maybe be 2 or 3 different buckets of money, if you will, separated by business type, but then I heard, well, separated by number of employees. So there were a couple of different
Yeah.
opinions there in terms of the way that you would do that. And
No, I think we started with that and then kind of went down and we collapsed it down and said it doesn't,
Right.
those don't necessarily matter. But then you get into, a percent of the business is derived from tourism. I mean, do we rank based on whatever number they give us there? Business status, fully operational, partial, fully closed. How do we assign points to that?
Well, I think some of them, I mean, to me, the percent of business derived from tourism, to me, that's sort of the binary, yes, it meets whatever our
Right.
criteria is for a tourism, substantial tourism business. So that's kind of a yes, no. But the other ones, you're right, are more subjective.
Right. And then, and again, I mean, we really don't have that much in here in criteria, unless I'm missing something, because you got the business status, and then estimated number of months your business can sustain the current revenue and conditions. How do you rank, do you base that on the level of the direness scale? And then commercial lease mortgage payment, you know, mine's 1,000, Barb's is 10,000. Do we, I really think that next step is where the hard part is.
I agree. I mean, the first question that we added here was, how much are you asking for?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you weight somebody who might ask for $10,000 versus somebody that's asking for $2,000?
Right. Do you give them a lot of points if they need 10, as opposed to somebody that needs 2?
So this is what I kind of think, why I'm recommending you do sort of big broad categories, so you're only, taking all those consideration and scoring to your, the reviewer's discretion. So we have one category that's all related to employment, maybe one related to tourism. I have no idea on that, that's gonna take some discussion here. And then say you come down to 4 large categories, and we have various questions within each one. And people, sort of in the simple approach that Seaside did, the reviewers give us their numbers, and then together those 4 boxes are equally weighted. Or they could be different if you wanna kind of heavily weigh one broad category more than the other, but typically you would just do an equal weight and then you get a final score.
Mhm.
And then the discussion before that final score comes forward when there's, more than the standard deviation between any reviewers.
And I think, I understand what you're saying, and I think that, like, if you're looking at an interview, you might have certain points for somebody that has a bachelor's, somebody that has a master's, someone that has so many years in the business or something like that, but these aren't that kind of question. And, I guess what I'm thinking about, and I can just see, you know, Ashley's ears turning red as I say these things, but that when you're talking, like, to me, I would look at it and say, well, they need help with rent and utilities, and well, how much are you asking for? And is that something we can do or something that we can't? And I don't know how you rank, again, I have a $200 utility bill, and Jim has a $5,000 utility bill. How do we rank that? And I think that we need, in this, talking about an independent review, kind of like what Kelly's doing, I think we need to have some basic agreement on what that would be before we go into it. As opposed to, you know, I do it my way and, Carolyn does it her way. And I'm not on the committee, so I'm giving it a lot of thought.
So have we talked about just doing a flat grant? So if you meet the criteria under the law, you can prove that you've been impacted by COVID-19, you get, you know, a $3,000 grant.
Did you take I'm sorry, but I sent you over something from, City of Seaside?
Yeah,
And they're doing very much, you know, something like
That's
that.
what they did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of the programs out there have kind of, you know, been like that, like the flat $1,200 to certain families, the increased $600 for unemployment. I mean, I think a lot of government agencies ran into this problem of how you decide who's in need of more funds, instead of just done the flat dollar amount way. And of course, like the pushback is it's going to impact, it's going to help some businesses rather than others, but some of the larger players in town may decide that a $3,000 grant isn't, worth applying for, and that would free up more money for, smaller players.
I think that might bring up an interesting point, Ashley, that with $300,000, do we have the ability to help somebody that has a $25,000 problem? Or are we thinking that we have to limit ourselves to somebody that's maybe a smaller business, has a smaller problem, and that's as far as we can go?
I mean, these are all policy calls.
Right, and we're going to be recommending that policy, but I think that's one of the things that Seaside did, is they said $4,000 is the number.
Is the max.
Is the max, but I'm not sure.
I don't know that we really have much discussion on that, other than the real question is how many people apply.
Right.
I mean, if you just average that out, it's going to end up being a smaller number that we can actually give to people if we have a lot of people apply. So if we limit that number to 100, 150, 200, then that's going to set a max that we can equally distribute to everyone. But is that how we want to do it or not? I'm not sure. Because when I first did this, we talked about $300,000, and we have 300 members. If everybody applied, that'd be $1,000 each. Is that really enough to benefit the most people? Or I wasn't sure that was the best way to do it, but it's the fairest way to do it.
I know it.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Sorry, I think I should probably leave the policy comments to you guys, but I mean, $3,000, wouldn't that cover most people's 1 month rent? It does something.
And I think it kind of goes back to, we're hoping everybody's getting to PPL loans and are finding support elsewhere too. And our goal of this was to bridge that gap, to get them through this time until they can actually get their funding from other sources. So if we can be successful with that and get that to them now and help them through this time, I'll feel like successful like this.
So the PPP loan just brought up a different way to approach this, is that just to pick, like PPP, they did payroll that will pay, payroll for 8 weeks as long as it meets this criteria. Another way to think about it is if you guys wanted to consider doing something like rent or mortgage payment for, 1 or 2 months, that could be a way to help everybody sort of equally.
Well, I think that another difference between what we're looking at in Seaside, or maybe we are looking at the same kind of a situation. Seaside made a decision on, for the lodging people, that they were going to waive the fees for the third quarter, our third quarter. And so, and they were eliminated from applying for any of these grants. So I think that, when you start talking about we are looking at doing some sort of a deferral, not necessarily a waiver, but that's what's been requested from folks in the industry. And so if we don't have those big players, do we have a smaller amount, and not the 300 that Jim's talking about? Is there a number that, maybe we can be targeting?
Again, that kind of goes back to where we had the different, the smaller groups when we started, accommodation, restaurants, and then retail.
Mm-hmm.
And council talked somewhat about that too, in terms of allocating a portion of the available funds to the different sectors, if you will, in order to have perhaps direction on, do they want to do something like that, either by number of employees or by, sector that the businesses are in order to perhaps, allocate the funds in the most impactful way.
And I think to keep this moving, anything that we're suggesting, I wouldn't just ask an open-ended question, I would have a recommendation tied to it, and then let them react to the recommendation.
So does anyone have a thought on the different buckets, or as Seaside did, they totally took lodging out of the grant equation, because they were given relief in another way.
Yeah,
But right now, that relief for lodging is not on the table here in Cannon Beach.
other
It's
than
a
the
deferment, but it's not a
yeah,
waiver.
right.
So we have to include that.
That would make sense.
Right.
Okay,
And I think the larger lodging people that, a small amount, if they need $50,000 to get through this crisis, then that's not gonna come from this pot of money. And they'll be respectful of that and know that that's gonna be the case. But a smaller hotel that might need that help now would apply. So I think businesses will be mostly respectful of the process, and if they don't really have the need, I would think they delve into this, but I don't want to eliminate anybody in the process. I want everybody that can benefit from this to benefit from this. If we have to make that bad call afterwards, and say yea or nay, then we at least allow them to. So many of the other processes, people have run into the wall and not even been able to get their application in, and they would not want us to have that happen as well.
okay, I'm just putting some that we talked about up here, being lodging, restaurants, retail.
Yeah, and then we had that other category.
Which I think we need to include.
Yeah, so I think we need to include it and make a case.
And making the case,
Or just the other.
I just put everything under other, because the other ones to me didn't really meet that.
and what makes them eligible, they have to make the case that they are a what?
Tourist-related.
Tourist-related facility, and I think Ashley recommended before, and I agree to include the, the definitions from the ORS in terms of the 10 years and physical location.
And I think we also agreed to put tourism promotion on there too. So somebody could try to make a case for one or the other.
Okay, is there anything else that we think might fall in there?
In terms of the categories?
Yeah. Do we have any thoughts on how to split $302,000? If we're gonna do it by bucket?
I would prefer not to do it by bucket.
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
recommend against that and just do a max amount.
Okay.
And it would be hard to say who's all gonna be in those buckets
I agree, I agree.
until
Some-
we actually
yeah.
The other, some of the council talked about buckets by industry, but then also talked about buckets in terms of how big, how many employees are in business, number of large businesses. I don't know if that makes sense either. Maybe that's something that will come out in the weighting of the criteria.
If it's not going to make a difference in my application, why do we care about the categories then? Because if we're not gonna have categories, then we're gonna compare, and I don't have a problem doing this, then we're gonna compare a restaurant with a gallery. So why do we have these?
Well, I think it's still on the table from the council perspective to divide it by category.
Okay, so if they're gonna divide by category, we're recommending these are probably the categories, and the other, this is how you would see if they're included or not.
But we would hope it's our committee recommendation not to do it by bucket, right? I mean, I still think we would ask their categories,
Yes.
even if we didn't do it
It's
by
just
bucket.
basic, it's just basic information about the business these top ones. I mean, it might end up, I don't know, might end up helping us, but
My preference would, and this is kind of why I felt we had these questions to begin with, is we were trying to identify who has the greatest need. Because really, those are the people we want to support. That would kind of be where I would weight things. I know this business is in dire straits right now and it needs the support. I would weight them higher than somebody who doesn't. That becomes subjective when you're looking at everybody, and if we have, I'm not sure how many applicants that will be a chore of itself, but that would kind of be my guiding thought to this. And so if we can identify those questions that lead to that, that's where I would weight heavier than necessarily income or employee status.
so do you recommend some additional questions to get to the point you were just making?
I think we have the questions, it's just, I would weight them that way. Ultimately, the goal is I don't want to lose any of our businesses if we can avoid it. And if it's gonna make a difference whether they can make it or not, those are the people I wanna help. And that I think we need to help.
And I just think at this point, it's hard to figure out how to weight the particular questions we have right now, because I think the way you're saying that is, it's data-driven, but you don't really know how that is going to work until you kind of see those particular answers. Yeah.
I feel like if we try to weight those questions right now,
Right,
we're taking a guess at what's important.
I agree.
When we start feeding in some of the data, I think that might show what's important and where we need to put that weight.
But I think we need to be careful with that, because you don't want the data to skew, or your personal opinion, or your, maybe some knowledge you have of one business over another to skew
True.
the objectivity of the data and the results for that.
Right, but I think that kind of fits the timeline that we were originally talking about, and it's actually similar to what Seaside did, if I'm, understanding this process right, is they did come up with the application materials, send it out, bring it in, and then they discuss afterwards, to try and data drive it a little bit. We can also find things as much as possible, that's a possibility, if you're looking to not get, personal bias in there.
Applicant number one.
Exactly.
And part of what, my concern is, anytime that you're trying to go ahead and be objective, the criteria or the points that you set, can you really justify those differences? And so, I'm kind of with Jim, and with the idea was, let's see what help we can give, and, I'm sure that this will never pass muster, but my thought was, we get the applications in with the information, then we know how much the requests are, and then we go through and try to help as many people as we can. But I don't think that it'll be, that much based on objectivity unless it's contrived, or is arbitrary now if we try to set it. And again, the example of somebody laid people off versus kept people on. We look at their situation and see what it is, and look at the money that we have and make a decision on it. Hard to decide, hard to defend, but otherwise we're trying to back into that by making up numbers, so.
Well, maybe, taking some lead here from what Seaside did in terms of, if you look at their procedure 432 at one point, and everybody except for people that just get 1 point will get some or all of their ask. And, you know, the only folks who wouldn't get anything are people that were, you know, incomplete applications, ineligible applicants. So to me, that kind of is partway between, you know, subjective and everyone who, you know, in good faith and did the application, completely did the application, are gonna get a portion of what they asked for.
Yeah, I agree, and it also, you hope in that case that people are honest in what their asks are and that kind of thing, so that, a bad character doesn't skew the, you know, the results. We can talk about all these other things, but just mentally, I don't see doing it other than, and suppose we get 50 or we get 100, that makes a whole difference when you, put up the money and say, this is how much we can help.
And from that perspective, I would say that our recommendation for council is they do need to, include some, if not all, of these essay questions, because I think if you're talking about trying to, you know, weigh some portion of this from a subjective perspective, you need that context in order to do that.
And I think that, you know, I would trust the folks that are on the committee, and that is no longer me, but I would trust you folks to look at that. I would think you would probably, if you did it individually, that if it's a 1 to 10 scale on the questions, that you folks would come up with a good, reasonable number across the board for a wise decision. That,
I think some basic weighting we can do is, you know, if they've met all the qualifying questions, they filled it out, and have all the data, that kind of put them in one category, and they've done that, that's good. Then you get into kind of the financial need would be another category. Then the subjective stuff would kind of maybe be a little bit less of a weighted category of questions, because we don't want that to kind of drive the vote. We want the need and the hard data to be way heavier than the subjective.
but even the financial need is going to be subjective.
Yeah.
So it all, you know, it all is.
Well, that's the going by grant request amount is a component of that.
Well, we did ask on here, one of the questions we asked was for the mortgage or lease payment amounts. Perhaps we should also include utility payment amounts. You know, so again, to get some concrete data there, to balance with, you know, the essay kind of questions. You know, because we kind of, you know, we know, okay, this is what the lease or mortgage is, and this is the utilities they're having to pay, that some, you know, financial base there without really looking at particulars of salary and revenue, where we kind of frame that as percentages, because we wanted to ask them for specific financial information on that.
And one person mentioned utilities to me, and so I'm thinking, oh, we're talking about that in water and wastewater. But that's not what they were looking at. They were looking, you know, at power and other things because of their business.
Natural gas.
And so, if somebody does come in and say that, and I don't know if we need to know how much everybody's paying in natural gas, but if you're asking for help in your utilities, then we should know what your utility bills are.
Right, and like an aggregate, what's your average monthly combined utilities, just like we're asking for a lease or mortgage, and again, that gives us a sense of one big portion of the financial need that we would have that.
So is there anything else that we're overlooking in terms of the overhead in the business? I mean, you've got your rent, your utilities, your payroll. You have insurances, you know, the health insurance factors.
Yeah. And I think that the open-ended questions will give that. Some, you know, if I'm gonna do it, I can make my case on that. And then saying, you know, how is this gonna help you? Well, here's my business plan if I get this much.
So, yeah, we have that, keeping that question, the specific plan for use of grant funding, so that's kind of the place where they can, as an explanation.
Yeah.
Those, you know, the components, whether insurance or.
Right, but but the ask is before that,
Yes.
saying, what, yes, and how are you gonna use the funds?
So, the project that we need to today to bring something to council for them to make some decisions tomorrow so that we can take the next step here.
I think we're at two big points. One is how far, what's your risk tolerance on this? With more risk tolerance, takes care of more people, less narrows the pool. And then, the approach, is a relatively subjective approach acceptable as opposed to an objective approach that, I've not heard anybody say, this is, again, laid off, kept employees, nobody's given me a good answer on how anybody would rate those. It's too hard. So, see if they're comfortable with that. And then the process after that would be, if they're comfortable with both of those, we move forward with the application, get them out. The people on the committee, and y'all can decide if you want to have a couple of other voting members on it, in between now and then. And then, come up with recommendations, and then, provide the recommendations to council.
So do you think after tomorrow's meeting that we would have the green light to go ahead and do the application?
If they are, well, once we know what level of risk, I think that's part of it. I think the bigger one is going to be, how, are we gonna push towards an objective, thing, which is gonna take a lot more time, I think, to try to sort that out? Or are they okay with the subjective process, kind of like what we've talked about? And if they're okay, we get the answer on the, risk tolerance, we're okay with this approach, fine. If they say, no, we're not comfortable unless it's more objective, then we won't be able to go out. We'll have to go and have another meeting and then try to develop criteria that we feel is fair and objective.
You're not suggesting that we necessarily remove the objective questions that are on here. The question really, for them really is more, do we include both the, objective data-driven questions here as well as the subjective essay questions?
Yeah, but I guess when I look at number of employees, that's objective, but we haven't come up with a criteria as to how we rate that.
Well, that doesn't mean that we can't come up with that criteria, it's just that we just don't have it right now.
Well, if we're willing to come up with that criteria, then I think that we need to go ahead and provide that, if that's the direction.
Well, I think maybe we get the input from council and then take that next step if they want to do something more objective.
Okay.
Or subjective, because I know personally for me, sitting there and reading a bunch of essay questions, the responses to them, and trying to subjectively or objectively looking at subjective information of if it's 100 applicants or 120, you get through 50 of them, and maybe your mindset starts changing because of what you've read so far, and then it's time you've got to go back again and go through them again. I'm more of a data-driven person than a subjective-driven person, and I just see issues with the subjective approach.
Sure.
It has to be a combination.
Yeah, it has to be a combination.
I think when we first initially came up with this plan, we were hoping that the data-driven questions would put a bunch of people into that category of, yes, they qualify, yes, they need help. And then when we get down to where we're either running out of funds or we have questions about whether there's need or not, or whatever those questions are, then we can turn to the subjective and kind of go that route. So I agree with you. Put in a spreadsheet, and I'll spend days figuring it out. So I'm hoping a lot of the data-driven stuff will, I guess, way to say it, but kind of make it real clear
think honestly, a lot of that part of it might all be equivalent. I mean, everybody is laid off people or, you
Or
know,
a mixture.
or it's some mixture. So I think it might, the data-driven part might put, like you said, almost everybody in the same bucket. And it will just, take the outliers out, and then you have to go from there to something a little more subjective.
Okay, Joel's recommendation.
The recommendation in terms of the first part, in terms of the risk level, we did talk about, if council doesn't want to accept all of that risk in terms of down to, musicians or people that certainly don't have a storefront. I think it would be, a good thing for them to at least consider, or is there other funding available that would open the grant opportunities to a larger group of the members of our community.
Mhm.
I think we definitely need that.
Yep, and yes, so we've made that part of the question. Excuse me. But also, I think that if there is a lower tolerance for risk, you reduce the pool and then potentially increase the degree of help that you're able to provide. Okay.
I kind of feel like decision on the risk.
Oh, yeah, that's it. So we asked them, what's your risk tolerance?
Once they tell us what that risk level is, we'll move forward with that.
And that would mean, depending on what their response is, it might alter some of the questions a little bit. But these questions really would be applicable to anyone. It's just what is their risk tolerance going to limit anyone. Is there anything else that we need to have council make some, hopefully, decision on tomorrow?
I can't stress enough that it just can't take that long. It's got to be a timely manner or we're not really helping people.
I agree fully.
And we have to convince the council of that. Because that's a reservation I had after the discussion,
Mhm.
that we're making this too long of a process.
I think it's very hard if they want to have full confidence that we thought every possible aspect through, and our plan is absolutely spot on perfect right now. That's not possible, I don't think.
I think I've been very clear that this is going to be a flawed process.
And you said it before, Bruce, is going to be a leap of faith
Mhm.
to get this done. And that's why I'm here. I want to get it done.
There's another aspect to this, and that if expediency is one of the most important criteria, then this could become, well, I guess ultimately they'll have to make the final decision on anything the way it's set up now. If it was administrative, it would be different, but if it's going to be going back to council, then we do have to go back with the iteration.
So to help streamline things, then you should have ready for tomorrow your recommendation for review. How you're going to review the process, because that's one of the next biggest item aside from just creating this process. And that's something that we've already sat here and discussed for a really long time, and it has potential to discuss for, to extend the time.
So you're
We're saving that for tomorrow, the extended forever.
you're suggesting for the
Yeah, but I think it'd be helpful if there was a recommendation to present to council.
tomorrow on how we're going to,
Yeah, what you recommend the review process look like.
in terms of criteria weighting or in terms of,
I think if we go back to our original plan, was to create the application form, get it out, that everybody would have a week to put in their applications. We were gonna take that time to look at the questions and weight them and kind of come up with our process of how to evaluate those. Because it's not, I don't think we can come up with that process in an hour meeting or 2-hour meeting. It's gonna take some discussion and thought. And so if we can get step one moved to where the questions make sense, we can get that out and start collecting the applications, then we've taken the first step. we can take the next step, however that works with council, I'm not sure about the meeting schedule. Then we can take their direction and incorporate that into our figuring out how we're going to evaluate all of this. And then we can present that to them while those applications are still coming in, and hopefully have that process nailed down before we get to the end of the application process, so that we're ready to evaluate those once we hit that date.
Can we at least, do some sort of top-level process in terms of, Bart outlined how you do that with the community grant, that the committee actually does the review and provides a recommendation to council for them to accept or modify as they choose. I mean, can we make a recommendation like that, at least at the top level, and then, as Jim says, while the applications are being filled out, we work on more of the details of how our review process would go. Do you think that satisfies what you were concerned about?
Yes, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Seem appropriate? Or a second?
No, I think that under normal circumstances, that is how it would go. And I'm sorry, I'm obtuse by nature, that I'm just, when we're talking, on one hand, we're saying that we don't have any idea on how we're gonna make this more objective, but then we're kind of talking about how we're gonna to rank. And so, if we're gonna talk about going and just saying, okay, let's get the process started, and then skip the part about, we'll talk to you folks later about the criteria, or is it gonna be an objective process or more subjective later? Then it extends the process. I would prefer that we have that conversation, I would suggest that you have that conversation tomorrow, so that you have that.
Tomorrow, when?
During the council meeting. So that when you're talking, you're saying on one hand, there's the objective side, on the other hand, there's 100% objective. This is the problem with the subjective side, this is what the problem with the objective side. We recommend that we go, one or the other, or if you're in the middle, then in the middle, what does that mean? So I think that the more direction you can get from council tomorrow, the better that we'll do next week.
Yeah, but to try to get that direction without us having, thought that through, then you end up with a conversation tomorrow of not 5 council members, but 5 council members plus 3 committee members, and, you end up getting a lot of things going around, and you don't really have a recommendation to work from. You have just everyone's idea kind of thrown in all at once.
I think you folks have to go in with a plan. I mean, that's what they're expecting.
But not necessarily a plan for the entire thing. I don't think we can figure out that all today.
Okay, but what is, sorry.
Go ahead, Bruce.
It's like solid wood. Once you receive the idea is to go ahead and agree on an application, and then send out the application and wait, what is the next, what are you going to be doing in the interim?
So I kind of feel like if the questions that we're asking and the application process is okay, and the council agrees to that, we're gonna take applications for a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they agree with that too, then we have that week to kind of figure out the subjective way that we're going to assess all of that. And we can provide that to them as soon as we have the time to sort through it and figure it out. And that requires another meeting, I assume, publicly. That's where I'm not so sure. But if we need to do that, and then we can also ask for input from people on that.
Because I think the questions that we have here would support either an objective approach, subjective, or somewhere in between. So if we, as a committee, can meet again as applicants are filling this out to to make that decision in terms of objective, subjective, or in between, before we look at any of the data that comes in. I think that would continue to move the process along, and it will give us time to think about that a little bit more before we make those sort of calls. But we need to do it before we actually look at any of the data that comes in, so it doesn't necessarily skew our.
Well, with the realization that we have to get that done before the end,
Yeah.
and we also have to get the council's approval of that process as well.
Then I think that if you go in with these are our questions, and ask for approval or modification, and then say that we will be working on putting together the how, and we'll start on Monday, if you all can meet on Monday, that we'll go ahead and we'll start on that, and we would probably want to meet with you, maybe work Monday and Tuesday, if you have to, set a meeting with council on Wednesday? Thursday? Okay, Thursday's okay.
Wednesday's not good.
Okay, well, then maybe if we can get far enough along, we ask them for Tuesday. But, if you think that you can, come up with that in a day, then that allows us to advertise for you on Monday. And then Tuesday, they have a chance to look at the criteria and stuff, your rankings, or your ratings,
Hey, Bruce,
weighting. Yes,
are you gonna need me available at those meetings?
Tomorrow's meeting.
well, tomorrow, you're on tomorrow, right?
I'm on tomorrow. So here's my 2 cents,
Yes.
is that, so next week I'm available, not on Monday at all, and then from noon to 5 p.m. And I think it would make the most sense is if I'm just available to answer questions. When they come up, I mean, I can also make myself available for the meeting as well, but it seems like a lot of these are just gonna be policies. So would that work for you guys?
So what did you say, Monday you're not available at all?
Yeah, Monday I'm in an all-day mediation.
Okay,
And then the rest of the week I'm available from noon to 5 p.m. And I'm more than willing to sit in, but I think, maybe like I'm just available for you guys to pick up the phone and give a call when you guys reach certain points or want to ask specific questions. So I'm just gonna leave that up to you guys.
so, if we wanted it actually available, it can't be Monday. So that would be Tuesday we meet. And I think potentially, can, Jim and Barb, could you potentially meet like at 5:30 if council was able to meet?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we shoot for Wednesday for 5:30.
For counseling,
Yes, and then you folks meet on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that might work. And then just a very long.
just got on that.
Yeah.
And our intent on that meeting would really be to talk about the objective versus subjective, how we're gonna do the weighting.
Yeah. So are we gonna have our meeting on Tuesday yet? Is that?
Yes,
1 o'clock.
yeah.
Does that work for you, Jim?
You said 1?
1?
Oh, I'm sorry. Next week I'm 1 o'clock would work for me. Well, I'm sorry, next week I'm actually on mornings, so 8 a.m. to like 1 is actually what I'm sorry, I messed up. Next week I'm available from 8 to 1.
Good morning.
But I don't have to have to do it for that till 11, so.
9?
Do you want to get the payroll done and meet at 10?
The payroll's at 11:15.
So,
Okay,
you
yeah.
wanna meet at 9?
Nine would be better.
I could also change my payroll. Do it in the afternoon.
And what did we call that?
Another one of these meetings.
What is our official title? I don't know. Did they give us?
I'm calling you a grant team.
It's on the website.
Grant Program Committee, according to the agenda.
Business Grant Program Committee, yep.
But our objective in that meeting is to determine as much as we can our criteria.
Ranking criteria, yes. And review process and
I would also throw in try to establish a timeline.
Is there is there a standard way of doing this? That we can pull from somewhere and give us a recommendation to start with?
Yeah, it's kind of what I've described, where you have a set number of viewers and you have a set number of, different items that are being weighted, or scored, not weighted,
Right.
but scored, and, you do it as each individual scores, each category 1 through 9, something like that, and then you aggregate those scores, and, or anywhere there's unanimous agreement or close to unanimous agreement within 1 standard deviation between those numbers, you're like, great, check off, we're not to talk about it. Anywhere that there are noticeable differences, you have to have a discussion, and, discuss why, and then you rescore.
But if you can send us something that,
Yeah, I can find it.
we can then take some of this time to do our research and our recommendations to add on to that, and then we'll be ready to, for that meeting. Wise for us to, it's legal, I guess, to share our thoughts before, or not? No? Can't do it? Okay.
The two of us constitute meetings, because there's only 3 of us.
Right,
Those
so
are
we can't-
quorums. We can't talk.
And we can't email.
Yeah.
So we can't, like,
You can,
create a summary of all this and send it out?
you can,
Okay, and then
We
you
just
just can add
can't
any
reply
comments.
all.
we can't discuss it amongst ourselves unless we're here in this meeting.
Thank you.
What did you think?
Thank you.
You talk well.
That's why I defer to you, because I haven't said it publicly yet.
So, no, Kelly, I think that you can,
Type of thing you
Type
want,
of-
that
type
you
of-
wanna take.
yes,
Okay.
yes, and send that out to all of us. We just can't comment to each other on,
Okay, but you can review and make it for accuracy, so we can bring that to council. Okay.
yes. So the plan for tomorrow, Bruce, is that, or will we, the committee be addressing council, or will you be addressing council?
The committee, I will help you any way that you want. But it's really, you are the ones that are reporting to them now. So I kind of trying to plan our next week. So Friday, the council and the team meet to talk about risk tolerance and anything about approach.
Yeah, I would like, when the meeting's over tomorrow, to have an application, basically.
Okay? So risk tolerance and application language,
Yeah.
all right? And then, Monday, the applications would go out.
But I think that's one of the things we need to set at the start and end date for the application.
Right, I'm just throwing something out. If we've got the thing by Friday, we can administratively get it out, or at least get it started. I'm not sure exactly how that would go. If we have emails for everybody, or what. So anyway, so that would go out, and where that works back to is, does that mean Monday, May 4th, applications due?
Can we back up a minute to the application?
Sure.
So we have the application content here. How does that, what's the next step on that? Is it somebody going to do a web-based application, or, what's the process between, yes, these are the questions we want, and here we're going to deploy it to the applicant?
I'm not sure, Rusty, do we have the capability of doing a web-based?
Yeah, we can do web-based forms.
Okay.
So then the big question is, are you prepared for an overload of applicants? Many other forms of crash during that process, so just throwing that out as a
Mhm.
question.
Good question.
I don't think we're in the hundreds of thousands.
I hope not.
Yeah.
And is it going to be open where folks can either, gonna like print out a paper copy and just handwrite it in, or are we going to ask them to fill it out online, or, again, just the mechanics of that? Sorry, I'm a mechanic kind of person.
Oh, I know.
I think we have to give both options.
We had talked about it being online. I know from our surveys that if you have an online form filled out, then that data can be automatically aggregated into, information. So, that would obviously be the preferred way, but I also see we don't want to exclude people because they're not computer happy either.
Yeah, we can input it from, you know, when we receive it.
It would probably only be a small amount, I'd assume, we wouldn't do.
Yeah.
But there will be some.
Yeah.
That's fine. Is that something that in this timeframe we're talking about, Rusty, is doable? If we're talking about if council says, yes, this is okay on Friday, what day did we talk about?
I think now I keep saying we need to hurry the process, but we also want it to be a good tool. And
Okay?
So,
having it completed over the weekend, probably not a fair thing to ask our city staff to do.
ask Rusty how long do you think we would need to add in the process in order to go from this Word document to an online?
Whereas, let me ask you this, if we were to import the one that Seaside did, could you modify it?
Probably, I'd have to see what Seaside looks like.
Okay, all right,
I would say probably half a day.
now then, if it's gonna populate something else, we have to have that done by a couple of days? People are gonna be submitting. Do you have something to,
I prefer any kind of spreadsheet population, it doesn't matter though, Excel or Google Sheets, but that's usually the easiest way to do this. You can input formulas that will automatically
okay,
rank and score and everything like that.
can you put that together for us?
I'm not sure how when we do it, it automatic, we just export it into an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, I just need to know what it is.
Constant contact.
Constant contact or other form too.
I just want to make sure we have enough time in our timeline to do that technical part of it, so that when it gets out there for the applicants, that they don't have severe frustration because, you know, this doesn't work, or that doesn't work.
Right, because that's what they've been facing with all of us
Mm-hmm.
so far.
But yeah, the spreadsheet import part doesn't, have to be on such a tight timeline because we can figure that out while the applications are already out. As long as I just know what it's exporting into, we can work with whatever that is.
Okay,
So maybe like Tuesday to open the applications, to give Monday to work through all of the technical steps.
Do we want to review that too, once you have it built?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be something I miss that
That's how
somebody
we,
catch.
spell check and
Yep.
make sure the
okay,
questions are.
and you're meeting on Tuesday at 9,
Yeah.
so let's have a review.
Maybe at that meeting, we can plan on, like, stepping through the whole application and fill it in as if we were an applicant.
Yeah,
And,
we could put it up on the TV and you guys can all look at it.
Yep.
Seems more logical.
Yeah.
Timeline.
And then,
Rusty, we are just bombing this poor guy.
So Bruce, this is Ashley.
Yeah.
Do we think that we need to have the entire subcommittee at the council meeting and participating in the discussion, or can we just send one person as a representative and the other people can, you know, listen in but not participate?
That'll be up to them, but I think that the council is used to working with all these folks, and so they might have questions specifically for them.
Okay,
It's up to you.
Always a good idea to have as many members as possible.
Yeah,
I think we all are coming at it from some different perspectives.
yeah. So Ashley, in that case, do we advertise, for both?
yeah, so I just sent Colleen an email about that. if we're gonna have both committees meeting, and they're not gonna be just receiving information, but going back and forth, then we'll need to, notice it as a meeting of this committee as well. Is Colleen available?
I don't know. But, I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah, that's my concern as
Okay.
well.
Well, we can get it up, we can have it happen pretty quick. Rusty, is that something that you could put together? Just an advertisement saying that, this committee will be meeting with council tomorrow?
We can put some out.
Yeah, Rusty's here, and he can get something on the website, we can clean it up.
Okay,
So we need to get that done pretty quick.
okay.
Think about too, if you wanted the, for that Tuesday part, if you wanted the, application process, the review process, if you find it or not.
I'm sorry?
If you want the review, rating and scoring process to be blinded or not. That'll change the spreadsheet a little bit.
Oh, it has the business names on.
Whether as reviewers, you wanna be able to identify the business or not.
So if we go a blind route, then a lot of those questions need to be left out. What the reviewers see.
You don't have to leave them out, it is true, they will become pretty self-identifying in that process, though. So it, you know, it could just be a whole move so you can find it as a whole. That's just, if you feel like there might be, too much personal bias in the review process, it's something to consider. And you don't have to decide right now, but that's something that can be discussed.
It won't take a timetable.
No. It would just affect the spreadsheet and the DVC.
So the Tuesday, the applications go out after the team meeting. On Tuesday, we'll have had a conversation about how the criteria will be rated and scored. And so we set a meeting for council on, Wednesday at 5:30. And then, will you all need another meeting to take the input to try to finalize it? You okay with Thursday?
Sure.
What time?
We'll actually need to be there on that one, so we'll need to do.
Yeah, she will probably need to be there.
Okay.
So let's do 10? Ashley, can you make Thursday, next week, Thursday at 10?
Yep.
Okay. And this is for you,
Can we review all the meetings, before this call ends?
yes, absolutely. All right, so, let me start with where we are. Tomorrow, Friday, council and team to talk about risk tolerance and application language. I have no idea what this guy's typing, advertise. Every time I think I'm doing good, I really mess up. 4. Advertise, we have to advertise the meeting, revise it for team and council. Tuesday at 9, review the application, how the application will be rated and scored. That's the team. Applications go out after that team meeting. Wednesday, council and team meet to talk about criteria.
And what time was the Wednesday one?
5:30. That a problem?
Nope, just put it on my calendar.
Okay, good. All right. Thursday at 10, the team meets to consider the council feedback from Wednesday. Hopefully we'll be done. And then, so the application went out on Tuesday. What are we looking at for receiving the applications?
It'll
May sixth, which is Wednesday.
Right, so we'll have from that, the application will go on the lab on the 29th, right?
Yeah, I have my calendar up. If Tuesday is the 29th, yes, at the end of the day, by the end of the day.
That's the 28th, okay.
Okay,
At the
28th.
end of the day, so
The end of the day.
deadline.
So if we make the deadline the end of the day on the 5th, Tuesday, so they have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Or do you want to do the 6th?
I'm fine with it. Giving them an extra half day,
Okay, the
and
6th,
it's fine with me.
close the business on the 6th.
Which, time. And
Right, 5 o'clock, right.
So the criteria, you will finalize the criteria on Thursday at 10. And you said Tuesday was the 28th?
Tuesday is the 28th. So for the meeting tomorrow, you have the 2 items listed, but should be able to add to that the tentative schedule that we're just outlining now.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because that's time to make decisions that change this.
Right.
Right.
So we'll also cover that with council tomorrow, what the schedule we've just laid out. And also, I think we've discussed the really top level review process that, that the committee would, review everything that came in based on the criteria we are to develop, provide recommendations to council, and then council would make the final decision, similar to how the other grant programs work.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that's something we need to have determined by them tomorrow.
Right, so yeah, I wanted to add that to so we have kind of 4 things for tomorrow.
That process is.
Right. Right. That they agree with that, and then we'll work on the detailed criteria in the meeting in the following week.
Yep.
Okay. So is there anything else, Bruce, or are you still, we have more things that we need to?
Yes. Wednesday, May 6th, close the business, we get applications. When do you want to sit down?
So, we're hoping that the majority of them will come in online, so they will hopefully self-populate some sort of Google Sheets or something. But we would need some time to transcribe any ones that come in on paper. We're gonna have to give an estimate. Right.
That's okay, no problem.
And I guess it comes down to logistics too, of how we're going to, you had mentioned maybe adding people to this review,
That's up to you. I mean, we could go up to 5.
or, how do we get that data out to everybody to review? What's the timeframe of that look like?
Well, in terms, first the question would be, are we adding people? Is that something that we want to ask council, if they want to add additional people to the review process?
I think they'll look to you. I think they're comfortable with the 3 of you, but it's a workload question.
What do you all think?
Well, I think we're far enough along in the process that to ask 2 people would be starting back
Yeah. Okay, then do you want to, sit down the next day? Do you wanna wait till Friday?
I would suggest maybe, have the meeting on Friday. I would like to at least, sometime on the day before to have, the information, like the completed spreadsheet provided to each of the
Yeah.
members of the committee, so we have a chance to look at it. So when we come together on Friday, we, we're not looking at it cold on that day.
I agree.
Okay.
Then it also becomes, are we looking to have that fully reviewed by them, or sit down and talk about how we're gonna review it, and what's the timeframe on it's gonna take to go through all that? It's kind of dependent on how many we get, I'm sure,
Right.
but,
Well, maybe when we meet next week, when we start talking about the actual objectives and technical criteria, maybe we'll have more idea of how far we would get on, the first look of the spreadsheet and the first meeting.
Right.
Yeah, your Wednesday, Thursday meetings could probably create a clear timeline.
once we open this and start getting those, we would have an idea of the number
Yeah.
as well, so.
Yeah, we want to make sure we don't review anything until we get
No,
the
yeah.
applications, but just the sheer number will help us, yeah.
So if we start the review on Friday the 8th, I would, again, with this wanting to get the funds out to the applicants as soon as we can, I would hope sometime within the next week, maybe by the end of the next week, that we would have some
The recommendation.
recommendations for council. It would be good if we could do it before that, without knowing the volume that we're going to have. I think we should just say no. Well, I was gonna say no here then, but we should shoot for maybe the Friday after.
Hey, Bruce.
Yeah.
So I'm really sorry, but I don't think that we can have a full meeting of this committee with the city council. I've been reading the public meetings manual. It would be a special meeting of this group with less than 24 hours notice. So our options would be to move the meeting with the council back to whenever we can get this notice. Or we send a representative of this committee to meet with council, and that person is the one that engages with council. Everybody else can be there and listening, they just can't deliberate amongst themselves.
I think just looking at each other, we agreed to not delay this at all, and
Right.
we'll send a representative because that's the faster way to do it.
That's
Okay.
tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and I'm really sorry about that. I should have anticipated that that's what you guys were gonna wanna do. So I've been trying to think of a way around it, and I can't. And so I don't want us to mess this up at that level. So, my apologies.
No worries. So, you will have to go ahead and decide who that is.
I would assume it would be the chair.
No, it was just for the, as Jen says, let the record show everybody pointed at Carolyn. Except Carolyn, she pointed at everybody else.
But we will be, there to support you.
We'll be right there behind you, sir. Yeah.
6 feet away.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, are we really, thinking that if we start on Friday, the 8th, remember, we're gonna have to have a meeting with council, them to final. So how long will it be for you folks to be able to say, this is where we think we are?
Well, I don't think we know that without knowing the volume of applications. So what we said is we would like to at least tentatively shoot for Friday the 15th as being the date that we have a recommendation ready for council. That is a soft date.
Yeah, I would hope that we can turn that around sooner.
I agree.
But we won't know until we have a number. But certainly, I wouldn't want to go longer than that.
Right.
Would you be mad at me if I put a sooner date? We can always push it out if the volume warrants it.
How sooner of a date are you talking about?
Wednesday, the 13th. And then I can talk to,
Is that for the council meeting?
yeah.
Well, no, because we as a group would have to meet in order to get the final recommendations.
Right.
And then we would go to council, which means that we would have to meet on
Monday or
Tuesday?
Tuesday?
We already have you set for a meeting on Friday the eighth.
Right.
And so I figured that it would probably go to Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, that would be the beginning of the review process, right?
Right.
So we have, because it's a public meeting, for us to get together to create that recommendation, we have to.
Yeah, and we can, we'll take care of the advertising for anything you gotta do, it's just how much time can you put towards it?
Well, I think we'll maybe know a little bit more about that when we meet on the,
Eight? Well, but, and like, Wednesday the sixth, you'll know all the applications that you've got, so.
right.
So on the eighth, you might be able to go ahead and say, this is how we can go through.
Depending on, how in the meeting the previous week, we decide that we're going to do the ranking and the assessment, because we don't have the details of the process. If we go something that's like totally subjective, I expect it might take, well, in my opinion, it would take longer than if you go objective. You might be the other way around on
Yeah.
that one. You guys might be somewhere else on that.
And I'm okay putting those initial timelines down, maybe a Tuesday meeting for us, and a Wednesday meeting with the council. That's a pretty aggressive timeline, but, kind of encourages us to be quicker about it.
How's that? We go up to Friday, and then the next line is team recommendation to council to be determined, okay? So we just say, we don't know for sure, what'll be going on the week of the 11th.
Yes, that's good. But our hope would be that somewhere on the week of the 11th, we'd have a final recommendation and council would be able to approve
Yeah.
sometime during that week.
Our goals for that,
Yes.
those to be complete. That'd be-
Did we set a time on Friday?
Nope. I would recommend it.
Find out what time.
When is she available? On Friday the 8th?
Ashley?
I'm sorry,
Did
say
you
it
hear the
again?
question, Ashley?
No, I didn't.
Friday the 8th.
Okay, so let me take a look at my calendar. And also, I'm going back on what I previously said. Let's just amend the agenda to have it include this group so everybody can go and talk tomorrow. Sorry to keep going back and forth, but I took a look at what we've already noticed, and I think it's gonna be sufficient. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so just, I'm sorry?
No, I think that would be good. I think it would be beneficial for everyone on the committee to be able to provide their point of view if they disagree or have additional things to add to what the chair might say.
Okay, good. So I guess just as a policy thing, we'll want to do that in the future to have them both referenced. But Rusty, if we could get that changed as soon as this meeting's over, that would be great. Okay, so next week I'm on mornings. The week after that, I'm on afternoons. The week of the 11th, I'm back to mornings.
So Friday, May 8th, 1 o'clock?
Friday, May 8th, that's the week before, so that would be, sorry, my schedule is very confusing. So I would be afternoons that day, so a 1 o'clock would work fine.
Okay.
Okay, so as far as what we present tomorrow, I can put this together in a memo and send it out tonight so council knows and you folks have got it, and it kind of sets up an agenda for the meetings, I'm sorry. That help? Okay. All right, so I'll put that in, and then, pretty much we don't have time, so it'll be a presentation, by the team, by the chair and the team members tomorrow. So when we modify the agenda, that's how we'll change it.
And Kelly, you're going to update the question list with the discussion we had today, and you're going to send that out at some point, so we can. Yeah?
And Kelly, when, you get that updated, would you send it to us, but also, send it to city council?
Yes.
Thanks. There's a block for them,
Okay.
or a list.
So should we talk about the public comment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Chair.
Okay. I just want to make sure that, that we acknowledge that we have received 2 pieces of correspondence from the public. And you answered Gary
Mm-hmm.
through an email, right?
Actually, it took several tries to get his name right, but yeah.
Okay. So in that, did you also correct the amount? 'Cause
Yes.
the initial- Okay.
Yes.
So the amount is the
302, yes.
302, and,
Yeah.
I take it from the response on that one is that using these funds is not going to affect either this year or next year's tax grant pool. We're using the reserve, or is it reserve, or
What is it?
I have to continue the conversations with Lori, but we've not really had a chance to go through the whole, TAP thing right now, because we're doing this and budget. So we will get to it. The intention, is to be able to go ahead and have the funds, but I don't know if we would have had the funds anyway, because the tax collections are so far down right now. Maybe the reserve would have allowed that to continue, I don't know. But, I guess we're prioritizing in that way, and then we'll look where we go, in the future.
and then the other comment that we got, I think we addressed that with the whole discussion about the brick and mortar
Right.
thing. So I
Okay.
think we've addressed that concern as well. Okay, and now that's the council's decision on that one in terms of the risk tolerance.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for reading that.
I don't have anything else now. I'm sure I will have anything.
All right, okay, we're adjourned then.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.